Tonight, it's a prince. Kate, the Duchess of Cambridge, delivers an heir. Elizabeth Palmer and Mark Phillips have the details. Pope Francis in the gray car is trapped and grabbed by surging crowds in Rio. Dean Reynolds is there. 3 bodies in trash bags are discovered in Cleveland. Police say they have a serial killer. Michelle Miller has the story. And what was your happiest moment? This man asked on Twitter and received hundreds of tweets of joy. Wyatt Andrews with the images of bliss.
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley.
Good evening. Think of it this way. What if we could tell you that a future president of the United States was born today? Well, we can't, of course, but we can report the birth of another future head of state, a king of England, or at least someone who is in line to be. The son born today to the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge is third in line to lead a 54-nation commonwealth of 2 billion people. He doesn't have a name yet, but he does have a title. His Royal Highness, Prince, name to come, of Cambridge. He was born at 4:24 p.m. London time. He weighs 8 pounds, 6 ounces. Elizabeth Palmer and Mark Phillips are in London for us tonight. And first, we'll go to Liz with the announcement that many were waiting for. Liz?
They sure were, and so we found out this afternoon it's a boy. The royal couple say that they couldn't be happier. Prince William was a thoroughly modern dad. He was in the delivery room for the birth, and then he spent the whole evening in the hospital to continue to be with his wife.
God save the Queen!
Millions got the news on Twitter, but a lucky handful heard it from the town crier outside St. Mary's Hospital. Shortly after an old-fashioned birth announcement had been carried down the stairs and sent by car across town to Buckingham Palace. 14 hours earlier, the Duchess of Cambridge had avoided those very stairs and, along with Prince William, had slipped past reporters and checked into the maternity ward at 6 in the morning. Royal reporter Veronica.
I mean, there was never any chance that Kate was going to go in through the front door in the middle of labour. So they snuck in through one of, there are about 9 entrances around the back of the hospital, so they snuck in through one of those pretty much undetected.
As the hours ticked by, tourists, well-wishers and passionate monarchists all gathered to wait.
And this is a special day, so why should I miss it?
Oh, it's fantastic. The whole country seems to be caught up in this enthusiasm, and it's nice to be a part of it.
Royal couples are expected to produce heirs. And from the moment of their engagement, Kate Middleton and Prince William made it clear they would try.
Obviously, you know, we want a family, so, you know, we'll have to start thinking about that.
A year and a half after their wedding, Kate was suddenly admitted to the hospital with morning sickness, and the cat was out of the bag. The Duchess continued to go about her royal duties as her bump grew and grew. Until today's birth, late in the afternoon, when the palace announced that Britain had a brand new 8 pound, 6 ounce prince.
Liz, I was expecting a name today. How long is it going to be before we know what the name is?
Could be a while. It took Prince Charles and Lady Diana a full week before they announced what William was going to be called. But the nation's been betting very heavily on this, and I checked with the bookies just before we came on air, and I can tell you tonight that the favorites are George, James, and Alexander, in that order.
There's the betting. Liz, thanks very much. So here is the line of succession to the throne, which is currently occupied by 87-year-old Queen Elizabeth. First in line is her 64-year-old son, Prince Charles, then his 31-year-old son, Prince William, and third, the prince born today. This is the first time since 1894 that there are 3 generations of heirs to the throne. More historical perspective now from Mark Phillips.
There's a royal show every day at Buckingham Palace, but not like this one. This crowd hoped for a special act, a front row seat to history, and it took a day of waiting before the official proclamation was quaintly placed in front of the palace. Royal births, after all, require public witness.
at least we're outside. In an earlier age, we would have been in the bedchamber.
According to historian David Starkey, in this intrusive media age, at least the gawking is done from a distance. In the past, say when the Queen was born, one may have been presented to the public by a nurse, but a government cabinet minister, this man, had to be around during the birth to confirm it was legit. In earlier times, many people had to bear witness for fear of a royal fake.
It was the real child, a representative group of the Privy Council, latterly only the Home Secretary, had to be there to watch.
A room full of people actually watching the birth.
Watching the birth.
The Queen stopped the practice when she had Prince Charles in 1948.
History was not made in another way, though. This is the first royal child that was destined to be heir to the throne, whether it was a boy or a girl. The old boys first law has been changed. But now, after all the fuss, it doesn't matter, because, Scott, it's a boy.
Mark Phillips in London for us tonight. Mark, thank you very much. A frenzied crowd mobbed a motorcade carrying Pope Francis in Rio de Janeiro today. Police say that the motorcade took a wrong turn and drove the Pope into a bottleneck. This is the first day of the Argentine Pope's return to his home continent, a 7-day tour of Brazil. The Pope wasn't hurt today, but the scenes looked alarming. Dean Reynolds is covering the trip for us tonight. Dean?
Scott, the Pope received a welcome that went way past warm and all the way to downright scary at times as he wound his way from the airport through the streets here in Rio. He declined the heavily protected and more familiar Pope-mobile for the more modest Fiat van, which is unprotected, and that proved so attractive a gesture that he was literally mobbed by well-wishers, thrusting their arms through his open passenger window and grabbing at his vestments. The motorcade route was apparently changed by the federal police here, and the local authorities said they were basically left in the dark. Other reports said the driver may have simply taken a wrong turn. Whatever the case, the result was a spectacle in which the Pope sat in his vehicle, stuck behind buses, just like a normal commuter in this city. He made the most of one pause, though, beckoning a woman and an infant close to him and briefly holding the infant and kissing it on its head before finally switching to a protected Rover, but those crowds stayed right with him. Now, Scott, Brazil is home to 1/10 of the world's Catholics, and at times today on his first visit here, it seemed like all of them wanted to say hello.
Dean, thanks very much. 1 million are expected to attend a papal mass on Copacabana Beach, and Pope Francis will also bless residents in a vast Rio slum. Today, in the town of East Cleveland, Ohio, police charged a registered sex offender with murder after the bodies of 3 women were discovered. Michelle Miller is there.
It was a call about a bad smell that led police to this abandoned home and garage. 2 of the bodies were found here. The 3rd victim was found in an overgrown field about 100 yards away. All were wrapped in plastic bags and killed within the past 2 weeks. East Cleveland Mayor Gary Norton.
As a community, we are dealing with tragedy, we are healing, and we are strong.
The suspect is Michael Madison. One of the bodies was found near his car. Shortly after his arrest, groups of neighbors pitched in to help look for more bodies. Plywood was pried off windows and doors of 40 foreclosed homes to conduct a room-by-room search.
Fortunately, with the grace of God, there was not another victim found yesterday.
Investigators say Madison told them he was inspired by a serial killer from Cleveland's past, Anthony Sowell. Sowell was convicted in 2011 for murdering 11 women and burying them in and around his home. He's now on death row.
If you want to commit a crime, East Cleveland is the perfect place to commit a crime.
Eric Wilson helped with this weekend's search.
In a community like this where you have all these abandoned houses, you don't know who to blame because everybody's poor. It just don't seem like there's enough money or resources to really make this place as safe as everybody envisioned it to be, as safe as everybody know it can be.
In May, 3 women were rescued after a decade of captivity in this rundown Cleveland home.
Help me, I'm Amanda Berry.
Ariel Castro is charged with chaining them up and beating and raping them. Eric Wilson told us people here feel like they live in what he calls a criminal fantasy world, where anything goes behind shuttered doors and windows.
It is a helpless situation because when you don't have the resources to move out of a place like this, you're trapped.
And Madison's relationship with the women has not been made public. Police have identified one of the victims. She was 38-year-old Angela Deskins, and Scott, she'd been missing since June 7th.
Michelle, thank you. The momentum is shifting in that vicious 2-year-old civil war in Syria. Nearly 100,000 people, mostly civilians, have been killed. Now, the dictator, Bashar al-Assad, is gaining the upper hand with help from Hezbollah, a militant group from Lebanon, which the United States says is a terrorist group. We wondered how Hezbollah is moving troops into Syria and whether Lebanon could be dragged into the war. Clarissa Ward went in to find out.
It has become a familiar sight. Funerals for Lebanon's Hezbollah fighters killed in Syria's bloody civil war. In recent months, the militant Shiite Muslim group has thrown its support behind Syria's President Bashar al-Assad. Fighting alongside the Syrian army, Hezbollah has helped them to win key victories against the Syrian rebels. A secretive group, Hezbollah gave us rare permission to travel to its stronghold of Hermel on the Syrian border. We were escorted by a Hezbollah guide who did not want to show his face. He told us that the group only joined Syria's civil war after Syrian rebels fired more than 100 rockets across the border. The rebels are the ones who transgressed against this land, he told us. Hezbollah is just defending its own people. Here, the border between Syria and Lebanon is so porous, it's easy for Hezbollah to move back and forth.
Our Hezbollah guide tells us that with just these few steps, we are now officially inside Syria. And Hezbollah fighters have been working very closely with the Syrian army to try to secure this entire corridor along the Lebanese border, and in doing so, cut off vital rebel supply lines.
When we climbed onto a rooftop, we could see a Syrian army checkpoint only 100 yards away. Hermel's deputy mayor, Essam Blabel, told us that Hezbollah's ties to the Syrian regime run deep. The backbone of Hezbollah is the Syrian regime, he said. They supported us with guns, they gave us all kinds of help, and we won't leave the people who helped us behind. But since Hezbollah has joined Syria's war, the fighting has spilled over the border to Lebanon. Blabel said it's a sacrifice he's willing to make.
Are you willing to support Hezbollah no matter what?
Yes, of course, he said. For Lebanon, the stakes are high. This country fought its own civil war for 15 years. Now many fear that their small, deeply divided nation could be consumed again, this time by Syria's war next door. Clarissa Ward, CBS News, Hermel, Lebanon.
Major League Baseball just suspended one of its biggest stars for drug use. And a new round is coming in the custody battle over baby Veronica when the CBS Evening News continues. More legal action is coming in the custody battle over a little girl. The case, which has already gone to the U.S. Supreme Court, pits a Native American man against a couple who wants to adopt the child. Elaine Quijano brings us up to date.
Got it. Dustin Brown has raised his biological daughter, 3-year-old Veronica, for the past year and a half. We met Veronica and the Browns outside Tulsa, Oklahoma earlier this month.
Everybody just needs to realize that she's happy. She's very happy here with us.
Brown had surrendered his parental rights before Veronica was born. Her unmarried biological mother then gave permission for her to be adopted by this couple, Matt and Melanie Capobianco. The Capobiancos raised her for the first 2 years of her life. But Brown objected to the adoption. A Cherokee Indian, he cited a federal law protecting Native American children from being separated from their families and tribes.
The only people that could really give you your history of your ancestors is your family.
He was awarded custody in 2011, and Veronica was moved from the Capobiancos' home to live with Brown. The custody fight continued all the way to the Supreme Court. In June, the High Court ruled the 1978 Indian Child Welfare Act did not apply to Brown's situation. Based on that, South Carolina's Supreme Court said last week the adoption should go through. There is absolutely no need to compound any suffering that baby girl may experience through continued litigation, the court said. Late today, Brown and the Cherokee Nation filed separate requests in South Carolina for new hearings in the case. Brown says Veronica doesn't recall who the Capobiancos are.
She's seen pictures of them, on TV holding her. She's always like, well, that's me, but who are they? It's sad that she doesn't know who they are, but to take her from us right now would devastate her, would ruin her world.
Veronica's adoption could be finalized in a matter of days. The Capobiancos have volunteered to go to Oklahoma to ease Veronica's transition. Scott, they say they're committed to making that transition sensitive and gradual.
Elaine, thanks very much. There's been an accident involving a Southwest Airlines jetliner, and we will tell you more about that in just a moment. A Southwest Airlines jet had a rough landing this evening at New York's LaGuardia Airport. Flight 345 from Nashville lost its nose gear on landing. The Boeing 737 with 149 people on board skidded to a stop. The plane was evacuated. There are a number of injuries. LaGuardia Airport was closed temporarily. Six Flags said today that it will use both internal and external experts to investigate the deadly roller coaster accident at its park outside Dallas. On Friday, a woman fell to her death from the Texas Giant roller coaster, which is 14 stories tall. Rosa Ayala Goana was 52. Just before the ride began, she told an attendant that the safety bar was not fully engaged. Dennis Farina was a Chicago cop for 18 years. Pretty good preparation for his second career as a character actor, often playing tough guys on both sides of the law. A mob boss in Get Shorty and Detective Joe Fontana on Law & Order.
Where is she? Who? The little girl, where is she? What little girl? I don't know what you're talking about. You know what I'm talking about now?
Dennis Farina died today of a blood clot on his lung. He was 69. What was the greatest memory of your life? A man who's collecting magical moments shows us next. The birth of a child, whether king or commoner, is one of the most joyous moments there is. But there are others, and the man you're about to meet has set out to collect as many as he can. Here's Wyatt Andrews.
2 weeks ago, Richard Deitch, a writer for Sports Illustrated, was on the social media website Twitter and found this photo of brothers celebrating Yale University's championship in hockey. Deitch thought for a second and sent a tweet asking his 87,000 followers how many of you have a photograph of the single best moment of your life. Within minutes came a rush of best moments. Parents' first moment with a newborn, the moment he asked and she says yes, the moment of homecoming from the dangers of war. Dozens and then hundreds of photos streamed in what Deitch describes as a fountain of humanity.
Never in my wildest dreams could I have expected hundreds of people sending me these just incredible intimate moments.
Because you didn't think that people would share?
I was surprised. I mean, one, it certainly felt like a gift, but two, it felt like I was in possession of something pretty sacred.
Deitch's favorite photographs capture what he calls success against the odds. Athletes crossing the finish line, patients who have just beaten cancer, babies battling for life in intensive care. John Skinta of Brooklyn sent this. His daughter Layla had been born with an elevated heart rate, and this was the moment he learned she'd be fine.
Good moment?
Great moment. Moment I'll never ever forget. It was the best feeling I've ever felt.
Layla is now 3 months old and thriving, and so to Skinta, that simple Twitter request for his best moment required an answer.
I want others to be able to know that there is joy out there, that you could feel as happy as I feel in that moment.
There's humanity out there, and there's friendship out there, and there's a sense of wanting to pass on something good.
Most of the photos freeze in time the instant that life is good. Welcome to the family. Splashdown in the pool. Look who was born when you were gone. Taken as a whole, they are more than best moments. In the eyes and in these faces is the portrait of joy itself. Wyatt Andrews, CBS News, New York.
And that's the CBS Evening News for tonight. For all of us at CBS News all around the world, good night.
Closed captioning is proudly sponsored by Citracal.